more things we can do with selection. So in this example, we're going to talk about how you can combine images and rotate them and different types of selection tools that we can use to create this wonderful little music collage. All right, so I have these images there on Blackboard. They're in that zip file called deconstructed right above the tutorials. So, I'm hoping that you are following along with these. All right, so this is going to be our end result. Let's start back at what we have here. We have a piece of music and we have an image of a violin and it's on a transparent background. How can I tell it's transparent? Because the checker means transparent. And I have an image of an oboe. Okay, so first I want to take this violin and I want to put it over into my music. So since I'm not worried about having to cut out the violin because the background is transparent, I can do the same method I did in the last video to copy, select everything, Control A, Control C, and go over to my music and Control V. Well, that's a nasty little surprise, isn't it? Why does it come in looking like this? I lost all my beautiful color. If you look up here in the tab, I can see that it's index. So index is one of those color modes I warned you guys about in the very beginning, saying that it can't take any color. So you want to switch that to RGB. So I'm going to undo that paste, go back in my history panel, and first I'm going to switch the color mode to RGB, and now I'll paste it in. And now there's my beautiful violin. Okay, great. So that was an easy one, Control A, Control C, Control V. Over here with the oboe, if I did that, I'm going to get the white block. Control A, Control C, and Control V. That's kind of ugly. That is not what I wanted. So I'm going to undo that. I want just the oboe. So back over here, there are a bunch of other selection tools we could use. We're not going to use any of these because these would always grab part of that white background. We're going to talk about these in another time, but they're not going to work for us right now because they're all kind of like drawing or sort of trying to find an edge, but it doesn't work quite as well. We're going to look at this group here instead, which has the object selection, quick selection, and magic wand. You could probably use all three of them. I'm going to use, because I have to make a choice, I'm going to pick magic wand tool. The magic wand tool is really good at picking up, if you click into an area, selecting colors that are the same color that you clicked on. And since I have a complete white background, if I click anywhere here, it's going to select everything. The magic wand tool, though, does work with the tolerance up here in the options level. Mine is set to 30, and that's going to work pretty well. So the tolerance is the higher the number, the higher tolerance it's going to have. In other words, it's going to start taking colors that are less similar to the color that you picked on. Again, not relevant here because everything is white. So I'm just going to simply click into the white, and it has selected all of my white. In fact, it has selected everything except for the oboe, which is perfect. But if at this point I did Control C to copy, go over to my music, Control V, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted. I selected the white. All right, I'm going to undo that. So instead, what I want to do, this is still selected, I could inverse my selection. So the long story of why I took you through this torturous process is to point out that sometimes when you're trying to select something, it's actually easier to select the background and then inverse your selection. So you go up to select, inverse, and now voila, my oboe is the thing selected. So now I will copy that and go over here and Control V and paste it in. And notice how every time I paste in an image, Photoshop is creating that layer for me. So I want to duplicate this layer. You saw in the final version, the oboe first of all needs to be behind, and I have two of these. And so a couple of different ways that you could duplicate a layer. One is I could take that layer and I could drag it down into the Create New Layer icon, and that duplicated it. Okay. And I don't see it here simply because it pasted right on top of itself. I'm going to undo that. I could also right click and choose duplicate layer. And it's asking me if I want to change the name, and I'm okay with it, just called layer 2 copy. And so there it is. And again, it's just that it pasted right on top of itself, so I don't see it. So I'm going to undo that, going to my history panel, The last method is you could do Control J. I like the keyboard shortcuts, and that also will duplicate your layer. So any way that you want to do it. But now here's the thing. I'm going to take my move tool. I wanted to move them out, make sure I could see it. I want to rotate one of them, or flip it really, so it's going the other direction. And we started to talk about how to address something like changing the size or direction of an individual layer through Edit Transform in our last video, and that's where we're going to go. Edit Transform, and I'm making sure that I have layer 2 copy selected, and I do. Edit Transform, and here I have a lot of things. That we talked about scale already. Rotate, if I just wanted to like make my own rotation and do it like that, I could certainly do it. I'm just clicking and dragging into the corner. I'm going to cancel that. Under Edit Transform, there are quite a few of these things which we'll talk about throughout the semester. The one I'm going to do right now is just simply flip horizontal, and it flipped it the way I wanted, and with my move tool I'm just going to move it into place. But what you can see is my layer order is not right. In my final one, I have the oboes behind. So all I need to do is switch my order here in my layers panel. I'm going to take layer 1 and I'm going to drag it above layer 2 and layer 2 copy. And I sort of get that blue bar, and now I have the correct order. So Photoshop sees from the top down. So whatever's on the top layer is going to be stacked on the layers underneath it. And lastly, just for the sake of example, and so I can throw out one more keyboard shortcut, we're going to create a layer and we're going to fill it with a solid color and then put it just above the music, but not above these other layers of instruments. So I'm going to create a new layer. There it is at my top, layer 3, and pick a color, any color you want. I have this kind of gold color. I'm fine with that. Keyboard shortcut to fill an area is Alt Backspace. Okay, Alt Backspace. The other way you could do it would be by using your Paint Bucket tool. So if I have my Paint Bucket tool, I'll just undo that. I could take my Paint Bucket tool, which is embedded within the gradient, and I could click into here and it does it as well. But in case you haven't figured out yet, I like my keyboard shortcut, so I use Alt Backspace. All right, so 2 things I need to do: change the layer order and clearly lower the opacity. So I'm going to take layer 3 and I'm going to drag it so it's landing between layer 2 and my background. So now the instruments aren't colored, but I need to lower the opacity just like we did in the painted image assignment so that that color is more just like a tint. Okay? And those are the steps. So these are just steps that you're going to be using throughout the semester, not necessarily intended to be all the steps that you're going to be using for your next project, just thinking long term, how do we get to learn all of these different selection tools in Photoshop? So let me know if you have any questions.